am so grateful to be here. Thank you, Annie and Mediation Services, for inviting me again this year. Was anyone here last year when I spoke? Okay. Friendly faces, that's good. Okay. And then I know some of you all, so that's great too. So I wanted to talk about the urgency of cultural humility. Anybody heard of cultural humility? Okay, good. I know a lot of people in healthcare have been having conversations about this. I'm one of those people, like, I get mad when there's like a new term or there's a new word that's been out for like 20 years and I'm just hearing about it. That's how I feel about cultural humility, because it came out in 1998. Yeah, see, and how much of the room didn't know about that? I know, be mad, it ain't my fault. I'm trying to catch you up. Okay, so I have been spending a little bit of time lately working on girls of color, women of color, being more visible and less ignored. So if anyone went to Witching Hour, we did a panel on invisible and ignored. And so the reason why I'm doing that is because Black girls and women particularly have a tendency to be hyper visible, which renders them to be invisible. So people have a tendency to see them, see their behavior, imitate their behaviors, but still do not see them for who they are and their brilliance and their amazingness and their Black girl magic, and they end up ignoring them. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in my presentation, about the danger of that. And so that's part of my why. I'm going to start with my why, the urgency first, and then I'll go backwards just so that you can, okay, now I got some fanciness. We're going to see what I can do. Okay, so humility, the quality or state of not thinking you are better than other people. Okay, that's just good old-fashioned Webster dictionary. Let me tell you my why. So, anybody know the case of these three girls? Black lady in the back, I see you, okay. This is important to me because this happened in Florida, St. Petersburg. Yes, Florida, I think it was earlier this year or last year. These are three young women. Anybody know their names? Their names are up here. 16-year-old Dominique Battle from St. Petersburg High School, 15-year-old Ashanti Butler from Dixie Hollins High, and 15-year-old Lanaya Miller from Gibbs High. These three girls drowned in a pond after they stole a car from a friend they got a ride from, and they drowned in a pond. And the officers said that they did all that they could to help these girls out of the car, and then the dash cam came out that they did not help them. And so these girls were rendered invisible because they had prior criminal charges. And so that's why you probably have never heard of them, because of the charges that they had. I'm going to show you a short clip, if I can, to talk more about the urgency. Why is this important? Why do we have to do this now? Why do we not have time to continue to wait? I've lived in Iowa for a long time, and I sit on a couple of state committees, and these days my nerves endings are fried because people continue to want to do this. We'll wait a little while, and in the process of your waiting, how many children are going without? How many children are being locked up? How many children are being harmed by our systems? And I always say, as a person who also works for the government is the worst parent out there. Really, they are. Because in the midst of all the processing and different things that happens, kids fall through the cracks, kids stay in systems longer. Even though we have rules and policies, that still continues to happen. Let me see if I can play this. Oh, yeah.
Black girls need less nurturing, less protection, less support, less comfort. They know more about adult topics, including sex. New research shows these beliefs are widely held in the United States. A groundbreaking report from Georgetown Law Center on Poverty and Inequality finds that adults view black girls as less innocent and more adult-like than their white peers. The study builds on previous research that found adults view black boys as less innocent than white boys, starting at age 10. The new study is the first to focus on girls and finds significant adultification bias against black girls as young as 5 and rising through age 14. The findings may help explain why black girls face harsher treatment than white girls, both in school and in the juvenile justice system. Black girls are 5 times more likely to be suspended than white girls and are punished more for minor subjective offenses like dress code violations, disobedience, and disruptive behavior. Schools are more likely to call the police on black girls. White girls account for half of all girls in school, but only a third of the girls referred to police, and 30% of the girls arrested. Black girls are less than 16% of girls in school, but account for 28% of police referrals and 37% of arrests. Past research has shown prosecutors drop 7 out of 10 cases against white girls, while only dropping 3 out of 10 against black girls. This data suggests bias plays a role when officials exercise discretion. Now, the new evidence that adults see black girls as needing less comfort and less protection begs the question, how can we ensure that stereotypes of black women as combative and hypersexualized don't reach into our schools and playgrounds and erase childhood for black girls? Share your story. Girlhood Interrupted.
Okay. I'm hoping you will catch my drift throughout this presentation of the urgency of this topic. That's problematic. Would anybody agree that those stats are problematic? Yeah, so I wanted to that's why I wanted to start with my why before I started going through all the other pieces of it. Because we can't keep doing this. For some reason, we are terrified to focus on race. We're terrified to focus on gender. When I talk to women in the state of Iowa and I say I'm doing work for women of color, I get this reaction from folks of, well, all women need help. Those statistics don't say that, okay? I'm not saying that all women wouldn't benefit from whatever it is that we do to change systems. I'm saying if we focus on the most vulnerable, if we focus on the people who are penalized the most due to bias, which I've heard a lot about bias, so y'all should probably have a PhD in bias by now, but I'm gonna layer it for you, bring a little intersectionality into it, then everyone benefits for it. I'll give you a prime example of the power of centering girls of color. Anybody heard of that the Iowa City Community School District is doing a climate survey? They've done climate surveys, raise your hand. I'm only doing that because I'm getting a glare from the back window, so I'm like, I think you're nodding, but I'm not sure. That survey came from my student, who was an MSW student, came to one of our G World groups. They had a meeting with administrators, and when they walked out, the girls said they didn't hear a thing we said. She ended up doing her second part of her practicum at the UI Public Policy Center and met Dr. Sarah Brook. And from there, we began to talk about climate survey. And they have been able to do quite a few surveys because we were able to take the story of those girls and we were able to say, we need to talk about what's going on, not just about grades, but how do girls feel when they are in these schools. And from that, they just recently wrote a grant, and I don't know if it's out yet, but they just were awarded $400,000 to continue that work. So that's the power of centering girls and women of color. Because why? Every student in Iowa City Community School District will benefit from it, and any research that they do will benefit the rest of the country. There is power in that. We can't keep running away from centering on any particular group. We can't keep doing this all lives mattering thing when there's particular people that are suffering at a higher level, okay? Let me go on. Who's my timer person? That's you? Okay, you give me the eye when I get 15 minutes. Okay, all right, because I can get moving. I'm trying to move quick. Okay, so quick outline. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a little bit of terminology. I'm going to go through it really quickly because I know some people have touched on implicit bias. I'm just going to layer that for you, and some other words that are kind of buzzwords, but you know, we got to keep up with the new lingo because I don't want y'all to be 20 years behind. Okay, so what is cultural humility, the need for it, and how to work to increase your cultural humility, okay? So, terminology. Oh, trying to take me out. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. Anybody familiar with that a little bit? Okay. Microaggressions, implicit bias, confirmation bias, white fragility, cultural competence, cultural humility. So I'm just layering this for you. So emotional intelligence is talking about is something created in the 90s. Again, see, if we didn't know, this is how they do. And it's basically talking about, is this, where's my little, is this that button? Oops. Okay. I was looking for the little red button. Okay, my bad. Practical terms, this means being aware that emotions can drive our behavior. We all know that. And so when you're looking at, sometimes when they talk about emotional intelligence, they're talking about low and high intelligence. And so low intelligence is looking at being more aggressive and demanding and egotistical and bossy and confrontational. They're easily distracted, glib, selfish, poor listeners, impulsive. And then some happened to my picture got cut off, but resistant to change, passive, responsive is slow, and they're stubborn. But on the high side is all the good stuff, like they're assertive, they're ambitious, driving, strong-willed, okay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But sometimes when I look at the low, I have 2 3-year-olds, they fall over here on this side a lot. Especially the egotistical part, because they were like, no, I'm going to my school with my brother. I'm like, I just said have a nice day. Like, I don't understand why you are talking to me in this way. It's a little disrespectful. But like, it's the craziest thing. So I've learned a lot from 3-year-olds who have 2 very different backgrounds about this. But when you're looking at that, we all have moments where we're on this side of it, right? When we get pushed to the edge, too far to the edge, and now we're like, oh, you know, and we have those moments sometimes. But as we grow and our families and people around us have taught us about how to deal with our emotions, you know, it's that saying, everything I needed to learn in life I learned in kindergarten. So it's kind of like, okay, take a breath. So that we can be able to be more highly emotionally intelligent about how we're dealing with things. And the reason why I brought this up is because anytime I have to talk about race, I have to layer this. And I came to a point recently, I have been doing diversity trainings for about a decade now, and what I have found is that anytime that I am asked to specifically speak about that topic, everyone who comes to me, they basically tell me that I have to be very, 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 very gentle. I have to use kid gloves and soft tones because I'm a larger black woman too, so I have to be very cautious. They're like, you know, give them gentle words, let them build up to it because this is a very tough topic. True, but we have an urgency for this. So like, you know, when you talk to you don't get to be like, hey, you know, it would be so great if you would clean your room. And I know I told you 15 times, you clean up your room, right? I'm at the point right now where I'm like, hey, I don't have time to play around because I got 7 out of 10 girls getting arrested. I got girls dying in ponds and people are not helping them, okay? I got girls that are only 6% of a population, but 40% of a juvenile justice. Like, that's a problem. I don't have time to like kid glove you about this. We need actions right now. We don't have time to sit around and to walk around and pat people on the back and say, are you gonna be all right? Because I told you what you said was disrespectful. You gotta get past that. We don't have time for that anymore, okay? So, we can't be on low emotional. So I'm gonna ask everybody to take a deep breath, inhale, exhale, whatever you gotta do, shake it, run to the back, you know, do that, because I'm just gonna go straight through it, okay? All right, so implicit bias. You don't have to do this activity because I know I'm running low on time and I'm gonna keep track of that. What I want you to think about is who are the 3 people you talk to the most? Just think about it for a second. Your best friend, your husband, whoever. Are they culturally diverse? Because if you don't surround yourself by people who are different than you, one, you're missing out because diversity makes us smarter. So I'm like, if you want to get those things in your brain, what neurons or something, if you want to get them fired up, come hang out with me for a weekend. I'll get you going. Okay. Think about that. Like, who do you surround yourself with? Who do you hang out with? You can't just be like, yes, we believe in diversity because we have 3 people of color that works in our entire department that is 400 people. That's not diversity, y'all. Okay. Here's when we're talking about diversity, a lot of times it's about bias. A lot of times we talk about race, and we should. But there's also gender bias, right? We know that, right? Only 12% of men think gender bias is a problem in their organization. I have a hard time saying that without laughing. But if you look at the pay disparities, right? We can look at pay disparity. Oh, I gotta lean this way. So this is, you can't see this, I'm sorry this is too small, but you can see the top bar is men and the bottom bar is the women, okay? Do we see a disparity? Is there anywhere look, this is professional, like PhD through high school. There is nowhere here where the lines are even close enough that we would be saying we're almost there. That gap is almost closed. Nowhere, nowhere. So that's a problem. Let's have some little music. We're gonna cut and paste. Let's see if I embedded this one. Ooh! Sorry, y'all, I get excited. Okay, anybody sing this? We need a musical interlude. Anyways, it's this great video. Anybody like Bruno Mars? Okay. Anybody seen that video where the equal rights video where he's like, oh, see, it would be so good. Maybe if I have time at the end, I'll pull it up. All right, but anyways, it's this great video, and he's just kind of talking about equal rights for women, right? And he's kind of using the same beat and kind of talking about how great it would be if we had all these things, and he's kind of dancing, kind of funny, but it's like we're laughing about it, but it's serious, right? We laugh sometimes to get through it, but it's very serious. Now, this is a bias issue that is very serious that we don't talk about enough here in Iowa, and this is a problem in Iowa. So first of all, the median wealth for a single white woman is $42,600. But the median wealth for a single black woman is $5,000. And if you are a black woman over the age of 50, your actual net wealth is only $5. Here's an issue. The infant mortality rate for black mothers is more than double that of white mothers due to factors like poverty, lack of access to health care, and the psychological effects of stress caused by living under structural oppression. And oppression for black women means that they get hit with gender and race, okay? That's why when I say it's important that we focus on girls and women of color, because they're getting hit double whammied every day, every day. Medium household wealth, going back to that, this number's a little bit updated. This is from 2010. If you are cohabiting and you're a white, non-Hispanic, or you're a married couple, your net median wealth, household wealth, is $193,400. If you are a single white woman, it's $49,180. And if you are a single African-American woman, it's $5,000. Bias is not funny when you are this woman. It's not funny at all. Or even if you are a single white woman, that's not funny either. All right. So, confirmation bias. People have heard of confirmation bias? It's basically someone told you, your message givers in life, your grandma, your auntie, whatever you call them, your nana, your teachers, the media, your message givers as you've grown up have given you information. All you have to do is have one example of that and it's confirmed. Black women are loud. And then you meet me when I'm out with my friends and it's like, see? I spent half my time living in Iowa seeing groups of white women being loud going, see, ain't nobody confirming that bias. You know, it's like, hey, what's going on, right? We laugh and everybody looks. They laugh and it's like regular good old times. I'm like, I've had a situation when I was driving back from Des Moines and I was at Jethro's. Y'all know Jethro's, right? Get some wings. Yeah. Okay. And I'm sitting there with my colleagues. Some of them are judges and attorneys and JCO chiefs, juvenile court officer chiefs. And one of my friends laughs real loud. She's got the ha, 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 ha. This lady walked from across the restaurant and came over to me and said, I just love big laughs. Your laugh is great. And I'm like, me? I was like, you need to talk to this lady over here. But that's what happens, right? We have these stereotypes, and anytime it's confirmed, then we act out of our bias. We act out of it. And that's where it gets dangerous. Okay, so white fragility. Anybody heard of this? This is kind of a newish, oldish, I'm gonna help you out with new terms. So it's talking about the state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress becomes intolerable, triggering the range of defensive moves. These moves include the outward display of emotions such as anger, fear, guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and leaving the stress-inducing situation. Does that sound like low emotional intelligence? You know why? It's because of white privilege, right? Let's get down to that. Because white people have not had to be socialized to have to think about race at all. You're not socialized to think about it. So therefore, it's like your friend that asks you to go do kickboxing. It hurts after that first time. You're like, whew, all this kicking and running and jumping and punching stuff, your whole body hurts. And so that's what it looks like that first time you have that tough conversation about race. You have these reactions where you see people get mad and they're guilty or they want to run away from the situation, right? But it's a muscle. We had to already start talking to our kids about race and they're 3.5 years old. Was your parents talking to you about race at 3.5 years old? So my kids are starting a muscle. They're working this muscle already. So by the time they're 15 and someone says something sideways to them, maybe they don't have to go upside their head because they called them a terrible word. Maybe they'll be like, you know what, that's your problem, okay? And so just imagine having to raise your children up in this way. Some people choose not to, but I have found that people who have tried to avoid, people who are from racial backgrounds that have tried to avoid having this conversation that are people of color, later in life they go, it didn't matter what we did, our Ivy League, all of the things that we did, it did not protect them from when they were out in the community and on the streets walking with their friends. So it's probably beneficial to just go ahead and have that conversation so that they're well prepared and they can build their emotional intelligence about this conversation. And so I would advise all of you all, if you have children or spouses or partners or friends or your mom or whoever, to start having that conversation, especially if that's not a conversation they have been having, because the demographics of Iowa and the world is changing. And by 2045, there will be no one that will be over 50% of any racial group. So it's kind of like the good Lord is like, hey, you better get used to brown people because they going to stay here. So get comfortable, get on your good comfortable shoes and be relaxed, because we can all love and care about each other, but we don't have to do it with subjugation. We don't have to do it with domination, okay? All right. Cultural competence, everybody in here has heard of cultural competence, right? We know this continuum, oh, you don't want to be in cultural destructiveness, etc. So cultural competence, just to review, is defined as a set of values, behaviors, attitudes, and practices within a system, organization, program, among individuals which enable them to work effectively cross-culturally, right? We've been saying that since the 80s. We haven't got too far up this continuum, but we have been saying it since the 80s. I want to push us a little further and say we should think about humility. Something very beautiful happens to people when their world has fallen apart. A humility, a nobility, a higher intelligence emerges at just the point when our knees hit the floor. And so I'm going to say we should look at cultural competence journey. Now let me say this. People who think that there's this end road, like Boys to the Men, like to the end of the road, like where cultural competence ends, you might as well get over that. Because you can work within any community and every family has their own culture. Because my family, just because I'm a black family, I keep trying to tell people, I'm up here as LaTasha DeLoach, LMSW. Now, there might be another LaTasha DeLoach, and I've seen her online, but she's a white lady who lives like in like Kentucky or something, so we have similar names with different lives. But I'm saying as a black woman, I can't represent all black women. I can tell you facts, I can tell you information, I can tell you my experience to add context to the content, but I'm an individual, just like everyone else. I'm saying we should push towards cultural humility. Now, cultural humility is an approach. So cultural competence is that information that you're gathering about different groups so that you can work effectively with them cross-culturally, right? So we're gaining this information so that we're able to work better together. Humility, cultural humility is more of the approach in how you gather that information and how it ends up in your heart. Long time ago, trainers like to talk about head, heart, and hands. So it's about how your heart is interpreting the information that you're receiving. It's about being willing to ask questions, gentle questions, so that you can learn more, so that you can internalize it, so it can be a part of the work and the walk that you're doing and how you're living your life. Okay? So it's a practice. It's to maintain a willingness to suspend what you know or what you think you know about a person based on generalizations about their culture. Okay, so one thing I always try to tell audiences, especially when I'm a black woman and the majority of my audience is white, is that there is a thing called racial anxiety, right? So it's the anxiety that you might have that I might say something and you think I'm gonna call you racist. And it's the anxiety that I have that I'm like, oh God, they're gonna think that I'm gonna call them racist, so I gotta change everything I'm saying. I gotta use my kid gloves. Where's my kid gloves? I left my kid gloves at home. Shoot. Right? So that's just sometimes a part of that anxiety. So that happens, right? But we have anxiety anytime we're meeting someone new because we're not sure what they're gonna say. You're reading the thing like the urgency for cultural humility. What's she gonna say? I wasn't sure when I wrote that, but I came up with something. Okay. Whether what you learn about your client's culture or the people that you're working with stems from being open to what they themselves have determined as their personal expression of their heritage and their culture. It's their personal experience. No one is the same. Even the people at your table, they're not the same. All right, something got goofy here with this. So there is a difference between humiliation and humility, right? Humility is marked by meekness or modesty in behavior. So I learned a long time ago, meekness means harnessed strength, okay? So that means you're strong, but you're able to harness it because you have a higher level of emotional intelligence and you're able to hold that to be able to truly hear what other people are saying about their own individual personal experiences. Versus humiliation is a state of disgrace or loss of self-respect, right? Because that's how some people feel like if I ask this question, I'm gonna be humiliated. Versus the opposite is if you ask it in a certain way, you know, maybe you don't ask it to the whole world. Like you probably shouldn't go on social media. Like that's like the worst, that's the worst way to have conversations with people about race. Has anybody ever won a social media fight? Like anybody? Anybody having like KOs? Like, gotcha. I've posted so much information, I just gave up. Because I'm like, you know what? You didn't even read that link, did you? You didn't read it. You didn't read that link. But, you know, so it's like having conversations with people in person is the best way, especially with people that you love. That's the best way to have those conversations when they're tough, regardless of what the topic is. You know, what if you want to tell somebody you're pregnant and, you know, it might be better to tell them in person if it's going to throw off their world. I don't know. It could be all kinds of things. The need for cultural humility. So this is a lifelong commitment, right? Like the cultural competence. These things are kind of being paired together. You're doing this work on yourself. You're doing self-evaluation and self-critique. You're critiquing yourself, not in a harsh way where you're like depressed for the next 6 months, but like, okay, maybe that question, I could have turned a couple words around. I could have asked it with less tone. If you know you're one of those people that when you say things, it has like a sharp edge to it. I'm like one of those people that sometimes when I speak, it sounds like a rusty knife. Like I'm like, what? You know, it's like, ow. You know, it's like, she cut me. I'm like, I didn't mean to cut you. I'm sorry. But just about how you say it and what you do. So redressing power imbalances. So if you're working with people and you are the supervisor or you are someone that is, you know, above them in some way, whether they're your client or they're your patient, or you have to be able to find ways. That's the heat, y'all. I just want y'all to know. I'm not humming. I don't have that much bass in my voice. That you should be able to try to find ways to redress that power imbalance so that people are able to be able to hear you where you are. Developing mutual beneficial partnerships with communities on behalf of individuals. So like doing that work in the community, if you don't know about other cultures, right, that's part of that cultural competence, you need to find out. Don't just make assumptions, and don't rely on just one person to be like the know-it-all of all things of whatever that culture is, right? Like you can't. It's like telling one man to come to me because I know all things about all types of women. Like that's impossible, right? Because it's so varied. People are so varied. So surrounding yourself with multiple types of people that can give you information, because like I said, we have new populations coming into Iowa all the time. We have populations of people who have been here for years, i.e. people from larger cities, which we say i.e. is Chicago, which we mean i.e. means black, that have been living in the state of Iowa for, my grandma would say, umpteen years. And we're just like, where are all these new people coming from? I'm like, what are you talking about? People move every day. Like, people get a job and they move every day. So I just think it's funny how we dress it up and we say we have these new people in town, the Chicagoans, hint, hint, and the black people that moved. And then we have these stereotypes about why people are there. And we assume that everyone falls. My favorite is when I have friends who are like from other places. They be like, you know I'm from Seattle, right? Like, you know, like I think I visited Chicago twice before. But we just make these assumptions about people versus asking them about their own experience. Okay, so there's 3 dimensions to this. So there's the lifelong learning, right? It's talking about the practicing, understanding what the culture is. That's part of that cultural competence work. And so people's identities are rooted in their history. So you get to know more about them because they get to say who they are. Being able to recognize and challenge the power imbalances. I just talked about that. Making sure that it's healthy and productive. I use this with social workers. It's effective social work practice, acknowledging and challenging power imbalance when you have clients. Institutional accountability. So even in your organization, that you all have to be able to be accountable and be able to model these principles and practices. Like we could talk about this stuff, but like, are you really working with the people in your organization or in your community where you're letting them inform you about information instead of jumping right to whatever class you took 10 years ago about Latino people from this certain area? Like you're going off of 10 years ago information and you've been allowing that to inform you versus asking questions. Also, basically this whole thing is ask questions, okay? So here's some of the issues, also layering about the need for cultural humility and its urgency is that when we're looking at health issues, when we're talking about discrimination, African Americans live sicker and die sooner than whites in America. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death. I'm dealing with that in my own family with my father right now. Middle-aged black males and females have death rates that are about twice as high as their white counterparts. Elevated deaths also are evident for cancer, stroke, diabetes, kidney disease, maternal death, etc. We talked about maternal death. Actually, in fact, every 7 minutes, a black person dies prematurely. That's more than 200 black people a day. So while I have been up here, how many people have died? Because of some of the stress that comes with discrimination with health. And there's lots of research on this. So anybody in health field know that there's lots of research about how this impacts people. So there was a recent study that came out a little bit ago, and they were saying that 32% of people who have personally experienced racial discrimination when going to a doctor or clinic, right? So 32% of those people said that they have experienced that. 22 have avoided seeking medical treatment because they're concerned with discrimination. Why? Because we have a history of that when it comes to people of color in our healthcare system. And then we don't allow time for that in those doctors' rooms because it's got to be in and out, in and out. 60% of them said that they have been, this is about people of color, I'm sorry. They or family members have been treated unfairly, stopped or treated by police. 31% have avoided calling the police when in need to avoid potential discrimination. That is a huge problem in domestic violence situations. Huge problem, because of all the statistics that we know, if you are a black woman in a relationship with a black male, you don't, even though you're in a terrible situation, you don't want that person to die because you don't want that on your conscience because you called. And it doesn't mean that all those situations end that way, but if you have enough statistics that say that, you end up sometimes staying in that situation. 45% say that they have been discriminated against when trying to rent a house. Now that's true. I have that problem a lot of times. I went ahead and just bought a house because every time we would try to rent, I would call and the first questions people would ask me was how many kids I have and that they don't take Section 8. So that was really annoying for like 9 years. So I decided to go ahead and buy a house, but everybody doesn't have that opportunity or the privilege to be able to purchase a home like that. But that's draining on you when you know you're ready to move because the landlord that you're living with is terrible and you want to get out of there because nothing gets fixed and the mold is creeping up in the bathroom and you want to move, and it's the emotional stress of it, right? The anxiety of it. All right, so a lot of us have been raised that we shouldn't see color, we should avoid it, because anybody raised this way, like treat everybody, I'm not picking on you. A lot of us were raised, we should be kind to everyone despite what they look like, right? But I would say, great, see through your heart. We're the same, but also look through your eyes and know that we're different, okay? Our lives are significantly different in this country based on a racial, gender, other areas of diversity. Okay, so this is what you can do. Practice, practice, practice. You gotta practice, people. It's the muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it. Yes. Oh, I got 5 or 15? Oh, I'm moving, I'm almost done, okay. Okay, so ask questions in a humble, safe manner. Seek self-awareness, suspend judgment, express kindness and compassion, support a safe and welcoming environment, and start where the patient, client, or person is at, okay? One thing I want you to do, anybody have questions before I go on? Since I got 15 minutes, I can slow down. I was moving quick.
Do the last slide again.
Last slide again. I can't make it any bigger.
Just tell us what it says.
I just did. Ask questions. Peg, were you not listening? Ask questions in a humble, safe manner. Seek self-awareness. Suspend judgment. And I can leave this up. I can flip back to it too. Express kindness and compassion. Support a safe and welcoming environment. And start where the patient, client, community member, whoever it is, where they are. Does that make sense? I'm not saying nothing rocket science, y'all. Y'all can probably Google half the stuff I said. I'm just trying to put it all together for you because it's important that if you've already been doing this, kudos to you, thank you. Please don't give up even when it gets hard. Please don't give up. If you gotta walk away, I understand, you gotta walk away for a minute. I have to walk away sometimes too. I'm like, you know what, I ain't dealing with them folks no more, whatever. And I still keep coming back. Because why? At the end of the day, I know that if we don't work on the different isms in our communities and the phobias in our community, people die from them, right? At the end of those health disparities, people die. And I don't want people to die because I didn't help keep trying to dismantle these systems of oppression. Nobody wants that on their conscience, right? But I always find that if I don't get enough people to help me pull these bricks out of this system of oppression, then I'm going to be in a situation where I got 20 people putting other bricks back and they sealing it up with concrete, and other things. And I'm like, well, dang, one step forward and 40 steps back. But I feel like if I can get more people, we can get enough momentum to push over the people that are putting the bricks back, that we can dismantle this thing. But I'm gonna need all of you all and everyone you're connected to and everyone they're connected to do that. It's gonna be some work. So, one thing I want you to think about is what is your commitment to cultural humility, right? So what is it? And what is your vision for what that looks like in your organization or in your community? Like, what is that? What does that look like? So that's something you can write down later or think about later, because it's something that you really have to kind of take some time to do. Someone had a question in the back. No? You changed your mind? Okay, fine. I didn't want to answer it. Anyways, I'm just kidding. Okay, no worries. I'm just kidding. So really think about that. So what is it? Do you feel like that you should have a commitment to cultural humility? Because cultural competence is amazing, and we have to continue to do that, but it's how we do it. Don't do it because it's attached to a dollar sign with your paycheck, but we should do it because we want to really do what it is that our parents said, is to treat everyone similarly. Similarly, not the same, right? Because that looks different. But see and know that their experience is different because of how they've lived, where they've grown up. It's just one of those like rural to city thing, right? I teach a class at the university, and I have students from like big cities and students from small towns, and they just be like, what? That, And so it's just having that conversation. It just allows both of them to see through each other's eyes, through each other's experiences, and it broadens who they are as individual people. Okay, other questions? Because I'm going to be done. We're going to be early. No questions? Yes?
So what are some strategies you can use to kind of break down the barriers people put up when they have that white fragility? So I work with a big office full of men, and sometimes I'll bring things up and they say, no, that's not how it is. Mm-hmm. What are some ways that you push through and say, actually?
It was a retired representative. We were on a panel, he said, if you ever want to get through to people, you have to meet your need with their greed. So you have to be able to find out, if you have to go to bottom line, like this impacts us this much financially if we don't do this. I mean, seriously, you have to meet, you have a need in your heart, like we need to do this differently. And sometimes it's about people's bottom line. And the reality is, if the changing demographic, so I was just recently at a juvenile justice conference, and they were saying, the lieutenant governor was saying that we have a low unemployment rate, about 3.6, and he was saying that's probably about, but even with that low unemployment, we have 50 to 70,000 jobs available every day in the state of Iowa. But then we also have about 50,000 people who are unemployed every day in Iowa. So, but a lot of these people are people of color, right? Because there's twice the rate for black people of that rate for unemployment. Wouldn't it be amazing if we found a way to help those folks get those skills so that they can get those jobs, and then we would have less people unemployed and people can be able to help their families? Right? So it's about meetings. So it's like, I know we don't want to talk about race, but this is an issue. Here's a huge gap. How do we help in this particular area with these particular people? If we focus on them and help them get the skills they need, then it will help our economy. Right? So you have to find a way to meet the need with the greed. Other questions? Yes?
I wanted to take Katie's question a step further.
Sure.
When you get somebody on board that there's a need, how do you help get your community past the well-meaning Facebook statuses or, watching documentaries? How do you help people find action steps, especially people, I'm an attorney, so at least I can orient my work in a certain way, but like my
The power of the internet, right? So there's all these groups and people that are seeking help, right? It's still the same thing, need and greed. It's about, if this is someone that wants to help in that, maybe it's not in your community, but that doesn't mean people are not coming to your community, right? So what work can you do in your community about, like, hey, I was changing. We want to be able to welcome whoever's here and start having those conversations in your community right now. Don't wait until someone decides they're going to build this fantastic factory up the road and you know people from all different backgrounds are going to come into your community. Start having that conversation now. Right now, this country is primed to talk about race. Over-primed. Like, you can talk about it every day. All you got to go and do is go on Twitter. Like, you'll be able to pick it up. Somebody saying something. And so you just be able to match that up with, it might be, maybe it's not in your particular town, but maybe it's a town right next to you or the city that's not far from you. And there may be some organizations that are seeking help or seeking to, to connect in some way. The other thing is that you have to travel sometimes a little bit to go and be around people who are different. So immersing yourself. And maybe that's just an event, but then you also have the power of reading people's blogs and being able to read books. There's so many amazing books out there that folks can be reading to educate themselves, right? Like, we all consider ourselves highly intelligent folks. Like, how many books have you read that were actually written by people of color? When you look at your bookshelf, what does it look like? So, I mean, there's so many ways that you can be doing that. And it's just about seeking it out. And I'm sure there's probably some like guide to like do this. I'm sure if I Googled it, I probably could find like the guide to be able to, to do this. But that's some of the basic things that I have to tell my students all the time is like, well, go over to that church that day and sit and have service and don't just leave right after. Talk to folks, like get to know people, because the thing about whiteness, and I'm not talking about white people, I'm talking about whiteness as a social construct, is it continues to stay the way it is because it allows people to have a level of comfort that other folks don't have. And you don't know that other people are uncomfortable because the power of whiteness is to surround you in a way that you don't have to know about other people's discomfort. And so if you don't make your own self uncomfortable, then you'll never have the change that it is you're looking for. Like I always, sorry, I have to keep referring to my students. I'm teaching a diversity class right now. I've never seen clothes get clean without an agitator. Never. Whether it was the good old-fashioned washboard back in the day, or even today with the ones that don't have a little thing in the middle, it still goes this little. So the only way that we'll ever get clean, only way that we'll ever have change is that we have to be able to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's hard to do, right? It's hard, but it's something that we have to do. We can no longer afford to stay in a state of complacency where we're not doing our work. And I need folks to do their work because it's exhausting. Like, it's exhausting kind of do this lift, and you're trying to lift other people around you. If other people lift too, it'll make it a lot easier on all of us. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Sunday feels like invasion and infringement for my benefit.
Well, it depends on your mindset when you're going in there, right? So if your attitude is to go in here and I'm just going to spy on black people today because I want to know how they worship, you going in without cultural humility. But if you're going in like, I'm about to praise the Lord up in here just like them and let me see your tambourine too, then that's different, right? Like, I'm here, I'm being a part of it. I'm not just observing you. I'm here because I love God too, and I go to this Baptist church with all white people, but I heard y'all got an organ player over here that is jamming, so I'm coming over here. That's humility, right, in your heart, where you're like, we have this common thing that we both love God, so I'm going to come to your church and observe that. Sometimes in Iowa, it's difficult to find groups of people of color because they kind of hide out. Because I always tell people, I said, tell me where you can go that you see a group of black people hanging out or a group of Latino people hanging out. Most people are like, I don't really know. Well, because we haven't made space for them in our community to have those spaces where they won't feel like that they'll be harassed or they won't feel like that it'll be an unsafe place. So some of that is also talking to your city council members and other elected folks. Like, we need to do better here. How can we only have 5 people who have five people who are people of color to have businesses in our community? I'm not saying that that's the actual number, but I'm just saying it's a low number. And we're talking about commerce and economy and all of that. We should be pressing upon those folks to make sure that that is happening in our communities as well, because everyone needs a place to take a deep breath. You know, everybody needs that place. Yes.
Sorry to take.
No, that's okay. I didn't see any other hands. Go.
So it feels to me like right now, if I were a person of color, I wouldn't necessarily, especially on a Sunday when I'm wanting to let down and worship, for example, I wouldn't really want white people there.
Why?
And because it's safe, it feels to me like we need, I'm just gonna make some mistakes here.
I'm not judging.
Or if I were a person of color right now, I think I would feel like I would want to be around people I could just let down with because it feels so unsafe.
When I go to church, I'm not worried about who my neighbor is. I'm there for a reason, and if that's to get.
Go to a club or something like that.
Have you seen that's the thing about that type of social spaces where people are just jamming. We both can like Drake and both be like, yeah, until you like say the wrong word, then I'm like, yo. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm in a space where I'm on a spiritual level, whether that's dance or that's in church. Now, if you come to my Black women's group and you want to sit there and just hear about the pain that we're enduring because you just want to observe, then we're going to have a problem. And you need to ask permission if that's something that we are open at that moment, because that is where we're specifically addressing our own emotions and we're trying to get support from one another. But if I'm going there to get support from the Bible or I'm at whatever it is, then that's different. Those social interactions are different. Yeah. Yes.
I have a simpler question that I think dovetails with what you're saying is, if someone's too shy for some of the examples that you're giving, like too shy to go to church, maybe they're not a Christian, can you give some other examples for people who are, big steps?
Yeah, some of it could be, we have so many cultural events, like all the time. There's so many cultural events. There's so many panels. Matter of fact, I'm doing a movie on Monday. It's called I'm Not Racist, Am I? At the public library, where there'll be discussion afterwards. Yes, it was excellent. Oh, yeah, that's right. You were there. It's an excellent movie. Like, there are opportunities all around us. It's about us seeking them out, because the power of whiteness, it shields us from the thing that can heal us. It shields us from the thing that will help us grow. So we have to push past the veil of that to really see those opportunities. And you can just sit there and observe, and over time, the thing is to develop relationships so that you have someone that you can talk to. I have some friends of mine that are white, that are close. When they say something crazy, I ain't gonna say something to them right there in that moment. I'm like, did you know you said something real crazy? Like, what's wrong with you? But we have that relationship where it might hurt their feeling in that moment. They know I'm coming from a place of love and that I really want to support them because they're doing this work. And I need them. I need them to continue to do this work because it's 3% Black people here. Like, that's a lot. I need, everybody else, we all need to work together to make it better. I see a hand. Yes. Iowa City Public Library. So feel free to come 6 o'clock. I'll try to get some popcorn. Well, they try to tell me not to make too much of a mess. Maybe it'll be snack mix. It's a little less, mess. Yes, thank you. Thank you.